you tried offering on that home that you thought was the one, but your offer didn't get accepted? Do you want your offer to get accepted? Well, in today's market, it's not unusual for buyers to have to put in 5 or even 6 offers before one gets accepted. Now, in this video, I'm going to review the things you shouldn't do when putting in an offer. And it starts right now. Hey guys, I'm Dana Weiss, a realtor here with Real Broker LLC in gorgeous sunny Melbourne, Florida. Now, if you or someone you know is coming to the Melbourne, Florida area, remind them to make the Weiss choice and reach out to us today. Today's video is all about what not to do if you want to get your offer accepted, especially in today's market. Right now, at least here in the Melbourne, Florida area, and certainly all of Brevard County, it's still a hot market, although things are beginning to cool off, especially depending on the price range that you're in. Because of the lower inventory and the multiple offer situations, it's important to understand offers to sellers. I want to help you understand what you need to do to get your offer accepted over maybe some others that are out there, as well as what not to do. Pro tip, it's actually not always the highest offer that gets accepted. Tip number 1. Let's talk about the purchase price. Now, in the crazy heyday of this current seller's market, you do still have sellers who are overpricing their homes, but the days of them actually going for that price are slowing way down. The majority of sellers are actually pricing their homes at market value, which is really where they should have been to begin with, right? Even though here in Florida, we are seeing lots of cash buyers coming in from different parts of the country, sellers know that typically the majority of buyers are getting financing for a home loan. And in those situations, the house cannot be sold over the appraisal amount unless the buyer has a mound of cash sitting around that they could actually use to make up the difference of the sales price versus the appraised price. Most buyers just aren't going for that anymore. So with that being said, you really want to do your research when it comes to what the home is actually worth. Get your buyer's agent to do a home analysis for you, which will show you recent home sales and what they actually sold for. Then you can compare to see if the price is coming in at what they have it listed for and what you might actually expect the appraisal to come in at. Now, in regards to the purchase price, the thing you should stay away from is if it's listed at market price and there are multiple offers. You absolutely do not want to offer a lower purchase price than what is asking. So if the house is listed at, say, I don't know, $315,000 for instance, and you just want to offer $275,000 because you want to get a really great deal, this is not the time to do that. We are just not in that kind of a market. You do not want to offer $20,000 or $30,000, heck, even $10,000 less, because you're not going to win in a multiple offer situation. Now, even though I said earlier that the price doesn't always determine who wins, it's still a factor. And if you come in and just looking cheap, the seller knows that you don't want the house badly enough. And why would they deal with you when they have others who are more serious buyers? Tip number 2, earnest money. Earnest money is your good faith deposit, which is something you make either at the time of your offer or at least within 3 days of your offer being accepted. Now, typically here in Melbourne, Brevard County, it's kind of typical as 1% of the purchase price, but if you really want your offer to stand out, the more earnest money, which is also really considered a skin in the game, right, that you offer, the more likely that will help set you apart from the other offers. I mean, think about it from the seller's perspective. Everyone is already offering 1%. So if on a $300,000 home, instead of offering the normal $3,000, say you offer $7,500 or even $10,000, which offer is going to stand out to you, the seller, as being the most earnest? The thing you have to keep in mind is that the earnest money, it gets applied to your closing statement when you go to close. So if you have the money sitting around and you are gonna apply it to the home purchase anyway, there's no harm in having it go to the earnest money. And again, it could make your offer stand out as wanting the house the most. Tip number 3, the closing costs. This can be a very confusing and difficult topic to discuss because some people actually need the sellers to cover the closing costs, which can be a very typical negotiation in a buyer's market. However, in this current seller's market, there is very little incentive for a seller to accept this. If you're able to cover your own closing costs and certainly not ask for the full amount, really even a portion of them, it will also help you to stand out and benefit you in a multiple offer situation. Unfortunately, that's just something, with the current situation that we're in, that you really just need to be aware of. So the thing you have to consider is this: if you do have some money saved for purchasing a home, what do you do with those funds? Earnest money, closing costs? Well, that's where having a great lender that you're working with can come into play and really help you figure this out. There are going to be, X amount of closing costs. No one can get around it. Every place wants their portion to handle the closing. What those closing costs are depend on multiple factors. So you really need to seek out preferably a local lender who can help you determine not only what you qualify for, but can give you scenarios on what closing costs could potentially be on certain price points of homes. Now, if you need a local one here in Melbourne, reach out to me because we have some excellent lenders that we like to suggest. All right, once you determine the closing costs, you'll be in a much better position to know how much you should put down as earnest money and whether or not you should ask for closing costs to be covered in any way. Number 4 is the closing date. You have to keep in mind that the seller has already made the decision to sell and they're emotionally detaching from the home. The more quickly they can get to a chosen date and their home moved on, the sooner they can move on to their next home or the next adventure in their life. Even though it seems like a little thing, it's actually really important to the seller. So choosing a date strategically with this in mind is important because it can also help your offer stand out. Some buyers haven't even begun the process of working with a lender, so they may have to ask for, say, a 60-day closing, and the seller may just not want to work with that. Even if the buyer has just begun to work with a lender, if everyone else is asking for the typical 30 to 45 days, but say you can offer half that or 20 days or whatever your lender is willing and able to do, the better your offer is going to look. Obviously, a cash buyer can choose any date that they want. But if you're financing, you have to go with whatever date your lender says that they can be ready to close. They have to not only get the money portion figured out, they have to be able to get it past underwriting before you can officially close. So this is just another reason to be working closely with your lender even before you start looking at homes. You got that right? Even before you start looking at homes. The financing part is really important. All right, the more you can give them and get approved before making the offer, the sooner your lender can close. And typically, at least right now in the seller's market, a pre-approval at the very least is pretty much required with every offer. What that means is a seller isn't even going to entertain your offer without knowing that you can either get the lending or that you have the cash on hand and can afford the home, which honestly is just the best practice no matter what kind of market that we're in. So be sure and keep all this in mind when asking for a specific closing date. Tip number 5, contingency upon a property selling. Ooh, ouch, this is a hard one. Now in this current market, this is almost a weird one to talk about because we just don't see this, a whole lot coming through. Certainly, at least not in my area. I don't know if maybe it's different in other areas. Lots of sellers have already moved on. The home is vacant. Maybe it was a rental, or we have a lot of buyers moving from out of state who've already sold their home and they just want to purchase one here locally. But it's still a normal thing in many parts of the country to need to sell your current home before you can purchase another one. Obviously, if there are multiple offers on a home and several don't need a home sale contingency, but several do, the sellers are just most likely not going to choose one that needs a home to sell. It's very unfortunate, but it's just the reality of this current market. That's not to say it's impossible, it's just more improbable at this point. The seller is actually taking a risk on your home selling within a specific time period in order for theirs to sell. Frankly, many just don't need or want that headache when they have others to choose from. Now in this market, even though offers do fall through for one reason or another, the home is still gonna sell once it goes back on the market. But what that means for the seller is that they then have to wait even longer to close on their home. So as we talked about before, you now know that's an extremely important part of this whole process for the seller. So if you find yourself in this situation of needing to sell your current home, just know that it's probably going to take you longer to find a seller who will be willing to accept the offer. Just want you to be prepared for that in this current market. But the good news is that you do have options. I actually did a video on that one previously, so check out my video on rent backs or lease back if you need more details on this option. These are just a few items that if you're currently searching for a house, you need to keep in mind when deciding to submit an offer. As you can see, there are certain things you can do and shouldn't do to make your offer stand out above others. But even if you're not in a multiple offer situation, you still want the seller to be happy choosing yours because they feel like you are really offering your best and not reluctantly agreeing because it's maybe the only one. When both sides feel good about the offer, it makes for a much better, smoother, and easier transaction than when one side or the other feels like they're being taken advantage of. And we definitely want to head off any ideas of regrets before they can even happen, because those things and thoughts springing up can be deal killers, okay? So remember, make the wise choice when it comes to all things Melbourne, Florida real estate, and we'll see you next video.